Imagine it's Russia in the early times of the USSR. Chill hangs in the air as peasants and soldiers surround a once glorious Orthodox cathedral. Its onion domes are blackened, the icons defaced. Inside, the liturgy has stopped. Priests have been dragged away, some imprisoned, some executed. The Eucharist is no longer celebrated. The divine liturgy has been replaced with silence, or worse, mockery. Some churches became silos, rainy and empty. Others are converted into anti-religious museums, where icons are paraded as primitive artifacts of an outdated age. Many, like the Cathedral of Christ the Saviour in Moscow, are eventually blown up. The Soviet regime, in its early fury, destroys not only buildings, communities too. Centuries of faith, ritual, and spiritual memory torn down in the name of progress. While Karl Marx treated religion with a degree of nuance, this vanishes for the Bolsheviks now in charge. It was religion, namely Russian Orthodoxy, that obstructed the grandiose visions of Lenin. Christianity, in its organized nature, was now cast as villainous, antagonistic to the new Soviet man. This was not a secularization of Christianity, oh no. It was purge, a war on belief, belonging, and behaviour. And yet, there are some voices today, including respected historians and philosophers, who argue that Christianity and communism are two sides of the same coin. Some of these include Sean McMeekin, a historian I quite respect, who focuses on communism, World War II, and the Ottoman Empire, as well as the late German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, best known for concepts concerning slave morality and the will of power. In my experiences online, I've noticed several people, particularly on the political right, claim there is a communist nature to Christianity. What urged me to make this video were the Quillette interviews that I've linked between Sean McMeekin and Jonathan Kay. Here, McMeekin frames Christianity as the roots of communism, drawing on a linear versus cyclical model of historical progress. I want to examine that claim, argue that while Christianity may have a link to communism, we must not exaggerate either the causes or causation, nor must we frame Christianity as the roots of communist ideology and action. Christianity's emphasis on humility, equality before God, as well as its missionary zeal, did not lay the groundwork for communist revolutions of the modern world. We must not fall for selective causation, nor should we simplify any religion or historical processes of history. I make my case by applying theological, philosophical, and historical methods. Overall, I do not deny the progressive streak present in some of Christianity, and nor do I engage in a true Scotsman fallacy. But for now, let's begin. I'm Madeline Rose Jones, and I study history, literature, and culture. Welcome to Snowy Fictions. Common rationale for blaming Christianity for communism is pointing out the Christian emphasis on empathy for others, equal treatment before God, as well as charity. The missionary streak of Christianity, aka the desire to spread it to other cultures and nations, is also shown in Karl Marx's call for revolution. But first, his argument does have merits. Christianity, being a monotheistic religion, does believe in the inherent dignity behind every individual. Certain parts of the Gospels and Christ's teachings are suggestive of communal action and looking after the welfare of others. But is this communism? Can we create a line between Jesus Christ in antiquity to contemporary communism? Well, maybe. We can also play the same game for the ideologies that often challenged communism, like liberalism, existentialism, environmentalism, conservative thought, traditional monarchy, and even fascism. We can do this because these modern movements are all European and arose in Christianized cultures. They are part of the Western tradition and all in some way react to the intellectual shockwave of the French Revolution. That's the real turning point of the modern West. The French Revolution, not the New Testament stripped away from its context. That's the real turning point. The French Revolution, not the New Testament stripped away from its context, is the common reference point for modern ideologies. Liberty, equality, fraternity has more in common with the Jacobins than with the Acts of the Apostles, and yet If we wanted to play the causation game, we could easily argue that all three, liberty, equality, and fraternity, also have roots in Christian theology. After all, are we not all brothers and sisters in Christ? Didn't Christianity liberate humanity from sheer, uncontrollable sin? Wasn't Christendom the building blocks towards modern nationhood, as shown in the Holy Roman Empire? That only proves my point. Christianity influenced everything in Western thought. That does not mean it caused everything. Influence is not culpability, and cherry-picking which ideologies Christianity gave birth to is historically dishonest. This is my problem with Sean McMeekin's historiography on Christianity and communism. It lacks the context into modern Western philosophy and how the medieval and early modern histories of Europe influenced it. By all means, we can measure whether a modern ideology is compatible with Christian teachings. For decades, theologians have wrestled with the role faith plays in politics. However, we should caution ourselves against claims like Christianity is at the root of communism. Ancient religions are not meant to fit easily into our modern political categories. And I think that's why we need caution, plus plenty of disclaimers and caveats when anyone tries to connect Christianity with communism. One common line of argument is that communism shares moral concerns with Christianity, for example, care for the poor, humility, and economic sharing. The argument is that Christianity's focus on equal dignity and worth, as well as charity and almsgiving, leans well to contemporary concerns about welfare, and that's true on the surface. But these same concerns exist in many world religions. Islam mandates zakat, a form of almsgiving and wealth redistribution. Buddhism teaches renunciation of material goods and a shared monastic life. Judaism affirms justice through charity and communal support, whereas in China, Confucius emphasized social harmony and moral duty to the weak. Yes, Christian charity is distinctive, shaped by the incarnation and the personalism of Christ, but it is not unique in its emphasis on compassion, sacrifice, or even a critique of wealth. While Christianity and ideals of what a true Christian life consists of have influenced modern political trends such as Christian and social democracy, we shouldn't treat Christianity as unique in desiring various forms of equality. Even equality, often cited as a Christian seed for communism, is a far broader concept. Islamic, Hindu, and Buddhist societies also debate caste, dignity, and shared ethical responsibility. What Christianity offers, though, instead, is spiritual equality before God, not forced material sameness. It's a very different vision, and it's certainly a beautiful one, but it's not explicitly communist. We must remember that communism, whether from the 19th century or in the contemporary era, does not have a monopoly over discussions about equality, fairness, and justice. We can find these concerns in many world religions and other political philosophies, whether Western or Eastern. So why single out Christianity? Why pretend its values were copied and distorted into communism while ignoring the global and religious diversity of moral concern? By doing this, we simplify not only world religion, but modern politics too. I really caution against thinking certain groups have a monopoly over a single, universal, one-word concept, especially when it is shown in various cultures, peoples, and eras. My point isn't to say that Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, and Hinduism are just as Christian as the Christians, or that they do equality just as Christians do. Rather, I'm framing the Christian approach to equality as different to the communist one, also pointing out that neither Christianity nor communism are the only religions and philosophies concerned with equality. Here is where the theory collapses under the weight of its own cruelty. If Christianity caused communism, why was it so brutally attacked by communist regimes? In the USSR, over 100,000 clergy were killed. Churches were demolished or desecrated. Icons turned into mere propaganda, and there were laws against the teaching of religion. Traditional Russian Orthodoxy was seen by the communists as an enemy, especially in the early decades of the Soviet Union. But there is more. In China, the Cultural Revolution destroyed Christian homes and churches. A similar story occurred in Cuba and Vietnam, which forced Catholic families to seek exile or refugee status for their children, as shown in Operation Peter Pan. The suppression of Christianity by communists is completely overwhelming. These weren't Christians in disguise. They were hateful enemies who sought to destroy Christianity at all levels. During the Spanish Civil War, thousands, and I mean thousands, of monks, nuns, and priests were slaughtered. Churches were burnt too. This violence wasn't an accident. It was ideological design and at the core of early 20th century communism. Contrary to the depiction given by Oswald Spengler, Nietzsche, and McMeekin, there is nothing Christian about killing Christians. After all, Karl Marx himself said, religion is the opioid of the masses, which Lenin later morphed into, we must combat religion. This is the ABC of materialism. Far from having concerns about clerical influence, the communists saw religion, especially Christianity, as obstructive to the world order they wanted to install. The new Soviet man isn't a Christian at all. While some communist regimes, like the later stage of the Soviet Union, had a more nuanced relationship to Christianity, there is no applying this to the era of Lenin, and there is no intellectual gymnastics that can reconcile the persecution of Christians by communists with the idea that Christianity and communism are kin. This was not a child rebelling against its parents. This was a deliberate annihilation of faith, history, and community. Belief, belonging, behavior. That's the 3B framework. It's a helpful way to understand what Christianity really is, not just as a list of values, but a lived, embodied, and communal faith. The 3B framework comes from various scholars of religion, such as Douglas Marshall, who often take a comparative look to understanding faith and spirituality around the world. A lived religion, especially ones deeply rooted in history, is more than a bullet point list of beliefs and viewpoints. Religions, especially Christianity, are also categorized by how Christians behave and the ways they construct and experience belonging with other Christians and within Christian spaces. Here are some Christian examples. In Russian Orthodoxy, this is seen in the Divine Liturgy, in iconography, incense, fasting, and feasts. In Thomas Aquinas' philosophy, we see it through moral reasoning, natural law, and Christian anthropology, whereas in the Middle East and North African Christian communities, it shows up in family life, hospitality, and communal worship. And this is my problem with Nietzsche and McMeekin. They view Christianity solely in terms of moral philosophy, which is utterly important, of course. But there is far more to Christianity as understood by scholars of religion, Christians themselves, and historians. It is not my intention to underrate the value of Christ's teachings or the Gospels. Rather, it is to question the idea of Christianity existing without behavior and belonging. For myself, these are fundamental parts of Christianity and being Christian. After all, there is no Christianity without Christ. It's not just feeding the poor or believing in equality. It's about entering into a sacramental life centered on the incarnation, crucifixion, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. A Christian life isn't centered around equality or grandiose notions of human rights. Rather, it is about Christ. It is about the church. It is about traditions, often best understood via family, culture, and the way an individual interacts with it. Communism, by contrast, systematically destroyed Christian belonging and criminalized Christian behavior. The Soviets didn't just disagree with Christian values. They bulldozed churches, banned sacraments, and arrested believers. Critics that I've mentioned often reduce Christianity to philosophy or mere sentiment, ignoring the ritual, communal, and historical body of the church. So, therefore, how exactly did baptism, confession, or monastic discipline lead to a one-party police state? I seek an answer to this question. In our quest to better equip ourselves against communism and communist-like politics, we have somewhat gone astray by thinking Christianity can exist in secularized or authoritarian forms without Christ. I think this is completely wrong and deeply misguided. The histories of persecution against Christians by communists go even further once you realize how many Christian leaders and groups sought to resist and put themselves against the hammer and sickle. Such opposition was rather early too, with Pope Leo VIII condemning socialism while upholding the dignity of workers within a moral and spiritual order in 1891 as well. In the early 20th century, the roots of Christian democracy started to grow, forming a strong opposition and alternative to not only fascism, but communism too. In Poland, the Catholic Church stood against Soviet rule, one of the few groups that did, and often at great personal cost. The Spanish Civil War, evil as it was against Catholics, mobilized many against communism. And it wasn't just Catholics either. Protestants and Orthodox Christians have produced numerous writings warning against communism's materialism and rejection of religious conscience. Christian ethics, when true to Christ, do not demand utopia through coercion. They offer mercy, personal transformation, and moral accountability. So, my challenge to those who believe Christianity caused communism: why was Christians historically in the 20th century against communism? What explains the rise of Christian democracy and consistent opposition to communist goals? As I explained in the previous point, there is no Christianity without Christ. I caution against viewing very modern political movements as watered down Christianity, especially when they are coded as secular or even atheistic. This is one of the most important differences between Christianity and communism. Communism believes in earthly perfection, future society with no poverty, no classes, no conflict. It promises paradise through revolution, and it demands absolute loyalty to that goal. Christianity, although, differs. Instead, Christianity teaches that the world has fallen, that humans are broken, and that salvation is not political but spiritual. We do not achieve the kingdom of God through force, we receive it through grace. As Christ said, "My kingdom is not of this world." And in Hebrews 13:14, we see, "For here we have no lasting city, but we seek the city that is to come." We should also listen to the Church Fathers. As St. Anthony the Great said, "He who is able to live in solitude, away from worldly affairs, imitates Christ." St. Gregory, the theologian, also says, "It is not peace we seek in this world, but peace of the world to come." And Aquinas, "The highest good is not in this life, but in the vision of God." Christianity, therefore, is not about perfect systems, but redemptive persons. We are called not to create heaven, but to long for it. Does communism share this view of utopia? Not really. Focus on inequality and material circumstances, as well as industrialization and the means of production, is far more earthly and urgent than the existential and long-termist view found in Christianity. They aren't necessarily the opposite of one another. There is some tension between both views. Solzhenitsyn, writing in his masterpiece The Gulag Archipelago, would warn against categorizing groups of people as solely good or evil. As he says, "The line separating good and evil passes not through states, nor between classes, nor between political parties either, but right through every heart and through all human hearts." This is a profoundly Christian view that was shaped from Solzhenitsyn's experiences in the Gulag, a first-hand life in the USSR under Stalin. It ties nicely into the long-standing tradition in Russian literature of redemption. Think Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, which is sorely absent in the black and white morality of the worst forms of communism, whether in China, the Soviet Union, or Vietnam. Of course, there are Christians who have incorporated revolutionary ideas into their lives and are utopian in the earthly sense. They aren't lesser Christians, and it is not my intention to categorize some people as the real Christians and others as fake. Rather, I view Christian teaching on utopia different to communist views on utopia, and I hope to have eliminated these differences here. If Christianity were essential to communism, how do we explain China, North Korea, and Vietnam? While Christianity did have a presence in these countries, especially China and the various missionaries throughout the early modern and modern periods, China, as well as Korea and Vietnam, clearly had foundations in other religions, like Buddhism and Taoism, even philosophies coming from Confucius. These traditions influenced daily life in the 20th century far more than Christianity did, and yet communism flourished. We saw it in China, North Korea, Vietnam, and also India and Cambodia. If communism had a Christian core, what explains the communism found in Ho Chi Minh, or Pol Pot, or Mao Zedong? The original writers of communism, like Marx and Engels, were clearly familiar with Christianity and Christian thought, particularly in the context of the 19th century. So, we may cut Friedrich Nietzsche and even Oswald Spengler slack for their claims of Christianity being at the root of communism. But We cannot do this in the 21st century and our philosophers and historians today. This is especially true in a time where our awareness of other religions and belief systems outside of the West is seemingly higher than ever before. The historian Julia Lovell points out the increasingly Asiatic character of communism in the 20th century in her book Maoism, which I highly recommend reading. Ideologies like communism and liberalism are never static. They evolve, change, and pick up influences from abroad. There's certainly a question as to what attracted some Asians to communism. The answers, however, are not found in Christian teachings or ritual. Curiously, Christianity was marked as a foreign, Western influence, leading to tragic persecutions and state surveillance. As was certainly the case in Vietnam, we also saw Marxist parties and ideologies rise in prominence in the Middle East and North Africa, often fueled by sentiment from colonialism and Western interference. Sure, both Christianity and communism are universal in nature, seeking to expand and having a space for all. Yet, we shouldn't confuse form with content. And honestly, I'm going to be real. Universalism didn't start with Christianity. We can find tracks of it in the Greco-Roman world, with travel writing from Herodotus, Stoic philosophy, Strabo's geography, and Roman imperial ideology. Christianity would certainly incorporate these aspects, but Christianity never had a monopoly over universalism and globalism. Unfortunately, the monotheistic and mission-driven nature of Christianity has been interpreted as, mainly by some on the right but also on the left, as worldly and expansive rather than provincial and specific to a certain ethnicity or nation. It's a point I'd like to discuss in a future video about Christianity's relationship to modern nationalism. If you are interested in this, please let me know. For now, I am arguing that Christianity does not and never has owned concepts of universalism and globalism. Let me be clear. I am not saying that Christians cannot value equality and workers' rights, nor am I saying that communism is a monolith. It obviously contains internal disagreement and diversity, like every religion and ideology. It's not in my interests to lecture anyone about what they ought to believe in. Rather, I aim to use historical methodology to interrogate the view and portrayal of a Christianity causing communism. This video is not a takedown of communism or Christianity. It is a critical response to the claims made by Sean McMeekin and Friedrich Nietzsche, and an invitation to see both religion and history in richer terms. I respect McMeekin's scholarship deeply, especially his work on the Ottoman Empire and World War II. Stalin's war remains one of the most insightful accounts of the Eastern Front, and I also find his awareness about the New World and its eventual contribution to Enlightenment thought and equality very compelling. And he certainly does have merit in addressing Christianity as viewing history in a linear rather than as cyclical way. But on this point, casual link between Christianity and communism, I believe we must tread more carefully because in my opinion, Sean McMeekin's claims go too far. There is a connection, but connections do not always equate to causes or roots, and we need to have caution in how much emphasis we give some connections more so than others, and Christianity is not responsible for what grows up to eradicate it. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. It helps Snowy Fictions grow and reach more people interested in history, theology, and literature. I'm more than happy to discuss this topic with you all further, and I'm quite open to suggestions and feedback. For those interested in content like this, I have several video essays about Christianity using historical methodology as well as brief explainer topics relevant to literature and culture. Snowy Fictions is my passion project centered around the humanities, and I'd love for you to join me. Thank you for watching this video today, and I will see you all soon. Goodbye for now, and Happy New Year.